Okay, the old wheel was looking pretty ordinary. A lot of holes through the leather. It was buggered. Yeah, you can see some spots where it was worn right through to the metal. So I took the best bit off and used a bit of about 1.5 mil aluminium. Flattened the piece out first and clamped it overnight to make sure it's nice and flat. And then I just marked it out around the perimeter so I can get a template of the pieces, because I had to make quite a few of them. I cut them out. Probably not the best choice of cutting equipment, but probably a jigsaw, probably a bit safer. But it's what I had, so that's what I used. Once I had the piece roughly cut out, I just filed the edges off just to get rid of all the roughness of them. Next thing I did was to just mark out all the stitching holes. It's very important that these are the same position on each side, and then you got the same number of holes down both sides, or otherwise your stitching won't match up when you go to stitch it. So the original holes looked pretty good, had the right spacing and the right numbers, so I just marked them out and used them. Next thing I did was center punch the holes, all the marks for the holes, and ready for the drilling. And then of course I drilled the holes. Used a 1.5mm or 1/16 inch drill bit for these. Gave the holes sort of quite good accuracy. Then I got the piece of leather. I bought half a hide, a little bit more than I needed, but it gave me enough to do 3 wheels, 3.5 probably wheels worth. The diameter of this wheel is about 95 centimeters. So sort of allowed me to mark and cut out all the pieces, plus have a bit of spare if I needed it. When you're cutting out the leather, just make sure you sort of keep it nice and accurate, because when the two edges of the piece of leather come up against each other in the wheel, you don't want too big a gap, or you don't want any overlap. Next I drilled the holes through the leather, so I put the template over the leather. I'm drilling the holes. This is like a Dremel clone that I'm using with a 1.5mm drill bit. Next thing I did was to sand the backside of the pieces of leather, so the suede side of it, on the edges where you're going to sew it together, because these are going to tuck around behind the leather and you want them fairly flat so it doesn't make the joins stick up on the wheel. Once you've done all of those pieces, sand them all out, you put the pieces face sides together and sew all of the pieces together in a big ring. The sewing machine here is a Saw-Right clone. I'm not quite sure how well you'd go with a standard sewing machine, but this one's got sort of plenty of power to punch through this sort of material. Once you got all the pieces sewn together, next thing you do is to wet them down, and then you got to flatten off those joins. So the two ends that are now sticking up where you've sewn it together need to be folded over and then pressed flat. So I wet the leather down. I used a piece of angle to get in between the two pieces and push them over, roll them over, and then got another piece of wood on top of it to hold them flat, and then clamped it together. So put that on, clamped it, and then repeated that for all of the joins around the wheel, and left it overnight for about 24 hours for it to dry. Next step is cleaning the wheel. When I pulled the leather off, it had a lot of residue on the wheel. I don't know whether it was glue or just the bits of the leather that had stuck to the wheel, but anyway, it needed a good clean, or else the muck sticks up through the leather and puts little bumps on the leather, and it doesn't look particularly good. Put the wheel up, and get all your pieces of joined leather together, take all the clamps off, and lay it out around the wheel. It's important to get all of the leather stretches quite a bit, so the little pieces where the spokes are have got to line up with the spokes, and you've got to sort of stretch the leather so that they all line up and all go into the right place. It takes a little bit of fiddling around to do it, but it's very worthwhile doing it, because you'll end up with a lot neater job. Once you got that done, you clamp it all in place so that nothing moves while you're stitching it. I started with all the seams and clamped them all, tied them all up with cable ties, and then cable ties on each side of the spokes to hold it all together and hold it all in alignment while I sewed it, because you tend to move it around otherwise. And particularly those bits where the spokes are, you don't want them to move. Next, I made up a little frame. This is just a bits of scrap wood. Screwed a couple of blocks to the bench that I was working on, and I was going to use this to sit the wheel and hold the wheel while I stitched it. Then you put the wheel on the frame and start stitching. So I'll let this go a bit, and then I'll slow it down a bit, and I'll explain how the stitching works. But basically I used a straight needle and a curved needle, and the first stitch went through with a straight needle, and then the second stitch went through with a curve, because the second stitch went straight through the spot where the first one went through. You cross them over between each stitch, and then you push them back the other way. And there it is. Thanks for watching.